I talked about contrast and depth last week, and now I want to talk about something that completes that whole thing, which is texture. And TLDR of this whole thing, grain good, texture good, production design the best. Now, I'm saying texture because I think it very much complements and completes that feeling that we have talked about in the last week's video, which was, contrast, depth, and intention of the whole thing. And this texture point is just that, that sprinkle. Does people do that anymore? It's just to, complete the whole 3D feeling. Because what I mean by this 3D feeling is like, even though when you're watching something two-dimensional, you are feeling that three-dimensional look, like you are actually seeing in 3 dimension. I hope it makes sense. So the thing about texture is, I think the best thing, probably because we have so many examples, it's not just film. It is everywhere. It is in architecture, in painting, in sculpture, in graphic design, in 3D design, even the keyboards that we use every day. People, humans, look for texture, look for tactility, look for some kind of feeling. And I think, the keyword here is feeling. I'm gonna come back to this word feeling all the time. And for the filmmaking part, when I say texture, I don't just mean grain, which grain is a big part of it, which I'm gonna talk about in this video. Big chunk of that, but it's not just that, that grain. It is much more. It is contrast, depth, intention, last week's video. It is production design. It is some kind of tactility feeling, which I have some cool examples that I'm gonna give. But before I give any examples, before I dive into anything, I want to talk about this feeling of texture. What is texture? And before that, today's sponsor is Shadow Raid Legends, Warhammer Legends. No, yeah, that was a joke. I would define texture as something that adds feeling, that adds life, that adds tactility to an image to make it real, make it feel like it's real. Grounded, it's immersive, because it's not just a visual cue, it is something that completes the whole image, that completes the feeling that you're trying to convey, that completes the emotion that you're trying to convey. Some singular great elements are like grain, contrast, depth, framing, lens characteristics, production design on how stuff looks. But I also have some really cool practical examples, which I'm going to dive into more, but I'm going to give them right now. So the first one is in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the opening scene of that, how Peter's suit wrinkles in the wind. That gives much more reality to that opening scene as to any other like MCU entry of Spider-Man. That is one little thing. You understand how much tactility it gives, how much of that like reality feeling, immersive feeling that it gives you. The Batman has done this incredibly well with, dirtying up the frame. Patrick Tomaso has a great video on that, but I'm going to talk about just a little bit of that too, but, whole video is great on that. The 7 does that really well, giving you this grimy, rainy feel of this whole unnamed city. Actually, the Fantastic Four trailer that has just, went live a couple of days ago, I believe, that has given this kind of like texture to it too, because when Johnny flames on, you see those lens flares, you see that there's dirt on the screen. Like that little element, that kind of like tactility gives you so much, it immerses you so much more in this, whole image making, filmmaking thing. Okay, with these little examples, I think we understand what I mean. I hope we do. And now I wanna pivot a little bit and talk about texture connects us to the physical world. It is something that we experience from the moment we're born. We're touching things, we're hearing things, we're feeling things. Like think of the cliche examples of like when you were a kid, the feeling of like wet grass under your feet, or like the tree bark, the hardness of the tree bark, or like the warmth of a sweater that you're wearing. Like these sensations are stored in our brain. When we accomplish our job good, we tap into that sensation, and the viewer can really feel warmth of the sweater, the harshness of the bark, because at the end it brings a feeling back. It makes you feel something, and that's the whole point of art, right? We try to make someone feel something, or when I do something, I try to feel something, I try to convey a feeling. And this type of like texture thing has not just been in filmmaking, it's been all over the art world. Painters with the different type of brush strokes, they try to convey this feeling of like, yeah, there's thick and there's thin, and think of Bob Ross stuff, oh, there's thickness there and there's thinness there, and stuff like that. Or in architecture, when you touch concrete, There are different types of concrete. There are concretes that feel a little bit more rough. There are concrete that are a little more flawless in a sense. Every one of them has a different feeling that conveys. We learn about this stuff in architecture school, really. Like every texture of concrete even has a different feeling that conveys to the resident, the viewer, the feeler. In 3D design, we try to get this perfect feeling of roughness, that it's not, that the thing that you're seeing is not perfect, that it's imperfect, that gives this feeling of real life. In keyboards, think about keyboards. Different keys have different, feels, or different keyboards have different feelings to them, different tactilities to them. And when people talk about keyboards, a lot of people talk about tactility of something. They say red switches are so much more tactile, or like marble-like. These are the stuff that I'm talking about when I say texture. And now that I say this, I also understand that I've given also examples in here, so it's kind of like why we crave texture and what is texture together. But it's the same thing with filmmaking, right? We want images that feel lived in. We want images that are immersive, tactile. One of the biggest ways how we achieve this actually should be contrast and depth and intention, in my opinion, and those I talked about in the last week's video, so go check that out. But this texture feeling is usually, we try to get this through grain and production design. We should. Production design is very important, but grain and production design. And before I get to production design, I want to stay on this topic of grain a little bit. Because grain is probably one of the most subjective and most emotionally driven ones and nostalgia driven ones, it comes as an issue to a lot of people, to a lot of filmmakers. First of all, let's go through this. Why do we think that grain feels nostalgic? I think this is especially true for my generation. We grew up with these clean and sharp and, digital sensors, and, the cameras that have prioritized giving you how real life looked over character. I don't mean this in a bad way or a good way. This is just, but because we never really experienced film, or at least I never experienced film as the default, we end up romanticizing that era, chasing a feeling that digital never gave us. Maybe that's because we were raised with digital, and if we weren't raised with digital, we would think otherwise. But I think this is a big reason, and grain plays directly into that feeling. It kind of even feels imperfect. I think is a really important word here, this imperfect word. And I don't think that this is nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. I think this is kind of a reaction to this clinical, sterile, super overly sharp digital sensors that we have seen, that we grew up with. We crave something that is imperfect, that is more organic. I think there's a great example on this in the design one, which is Brad Summer. Now I want to talk about this in another video on its full depth, because this anti-design movement has, I'm not gonna say perfected it, imperfected it in a sense, because they've done this so well. And again, this is a whole nother video, but again, this anti-design thinking is a big part of this grain movement, and I think that directly correlates to it. I don't mean grain is anti-design, whoa, but I think the feeling that of anti-design is some kind of in this grain feeling too. Yes, anti-design is a little different. I know, I've studied this, I know, but I think they directly correlate to each other. That's a great point, and I'm gonna talk about it in another video, so yes, I'm going to continue now. But nostalgia aside, grain is powerful because of what it does to an image. It creates a tactile and imperfect feel. It adds enough randomness and organicness that the image feels alive and not just frozen in time. Not one of them is better. Again, the other is just how I feel about this stuff. It makes, it makes the shadows softer. It makes the highlight roll off softer. It raises the shadows just a tiny little bit. That gives it much more of a natural vibe to it. And I think this correlates to the point that it reacts with light. Unlike digital noise, which is, just random fluctuations in the signal that sits on top of your image. I've talked about this in a past video, grain versus digital noise. about a month ago or something. I would again encourage you to check it out because there are some practical examples too. But the thing about it is, in that video I quoted David Mullen in an episode of Roger Deakins' Team Deakins podcast, where he said digital noise sits on top of the image and grain is the image, and that is the inherent difference of those two. If you remove digital noise, you still get a clean image. If you remove grain, you don't get an image, because what film is those little grain particles, they react with light and then they give you this image. And digital noise is again random fluctuations in the signal. It's not that. So if you remove that, clean image. If you remove grain, no image. And that's why grain feels so different from noise, because it is inherently in the image's DNA. It is not just a signal on top of your image. But like I alluded to earlier, texture is not gained solely by grain. One of the most overlooked aspects, I think, in this YouTube world of like filmmaking, I guess, is production design. It is the actual world within the frame. So as cinematographers, we choose the frame, but what is in this frame is maybe most important than even what we do. It's about the objects, it's about the materials, it's about the surfaces, it's about the combination of how those feel in this frame that you have created, in this world that you have created. This is easy to think that this is just in narrative projects, but it's not. It's in docs, it's in commercials, it's in narrative projects, it's in product videos, it's in everything. There are some really great examples on this, which I talked again in the beginning a little bit. But The Amazing Spider-Man 2, again, I'm going to show this scene right now again, because there is a huge difference between how the wind flops with Peter's suit and how it never moves, never wrinkles, never anything with Peter's suit from MCU. 7, I talked about again in the beginning. 7 is a film that is built on texture. The constant rain, the grimy walls, the yellow lighting, the damn decoyed oppressive feel of the city has been so greatly conveyed. And even like when I'm talking about that movie, I get like goosebumps, which I think this point should be like, is a filmmaker's dream, probably, you know, that when someone talks about something that you have made, you get that feeling again. And literally when I'm talking about 7, I get this like disgusting feel of the greed scene, you know. It's so it's just really goosebumps scene, man. This is storytelling through texture. Such an incredible example. Again, in this point also, like, other than production design, again, production design requires its whole like year of videos, but we talk about a little more than production design right now. Lens characteristics has been a big point on this texture feel, which I talked about last week too, the contrast and depth video. But lens characteristic, the scene that you're looking at right now, look at the focus fall off. Look at the focus fall off. Look at the bokeh in here and here. It's not an anamorphic lens, it's wide angle adapter. Still love this thing. Like, this is such an amazing phenomenon that is actually inherently within our lives. This is in what we eat, in fashion, different textures. The fleece has been on rise again, you know. I even have fleece right here. That's what filmmaking is. That's what life is. That's what art is. Trying to make someone feel something. Oh my god, the last 2 weeks videos, probably you have realized that I'm very passionate about this topic, which is art is supposed to make you feel something. Or I mean, you can even talk about, you know, art is not supposed to make you feel something. It just depends on whoever makes it. And I think that's true, because if we, you know, put it in a box and say art is supposed to make you feel something, and then you can say, yeah, art doesn't make me feel something, your art doesn't make me feel something, so is that art? So I guess that's open discussion. But again, I'm getting off topic. The keywords that I've talked about in this were feeling, reality, and immersiveness. That's it. Those 3. Because again, whatever it is, commercial, mini doc, YouTube video, Instagram reel, narrative project, you're trying to make someone feel something. And that is the most important thing. And everything that we use, from lens characteristics to texture to production design to CG, contrast, depth, everything is going towards to make you feel something, going towards the story. When I say the story, I've heard people say, why are you talking about story always? It's not narrative thing. It's not a narrative thing. The story is always there. Even if it's a commercial, there's a story. So everything that we do is towards a story. So serve the story. And TLDR of this whole thing, grain good, texture good, production design the best. And art is subjective. And be respectful to others that don't share your opinion, because opinions are opinions. Nothing's objective, everything's subjective. Yeah, that's that. I'll see you in next week's video. Fun fact for you, if you're still here, then you can say something, because this is actually my third time recording this video. I recorded it 2 times last week, and I'm editing this the Sunday of before this goes live. I open it up in DaVinci, and I had my mic on in here in the frame, and I see that it has focused on the fucking mic and not on my face, and I was fucking blurry. The whole scene was blurry. I was like, yeah, can I maybe salvage it? But it just looked so bad, and I was like, yeah, I have to do it again. And then I was like, okay, I bought this like FX30. I didn't buy it for autofocus, but I had expected it to be better than my old ZV-10, and I was like, yo, why is this happening? And then I saw, because I was zooming in with the zoom rocker like digitally, and when you do that, you lose eye tracking autofocus. Like, it doesn't track anymore, which I think is dumb, but I guess there's some magic behind it. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.